Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Jack Wood and I just like to make stuff. I'm building myself a homemade sailboat from scratch, and this is episode 6. Sorry that I haven't been posting in a while, but I'm trying to get back into it, so here's the next video. In today's episode, I'll be working on the mast support, doing a little bit of mast work. You'll find out what that is in a little bit, and I'll be working on the cockpit hatch cover. So let's get into it. I just want to let you guys know I'm pretty proud of that mast support. It's pretty strong. Okay, so now that the fiberglassing stage is 100% finished, I started making the mast support. And I'm sorry I didn't film it, but it's essentially just literally a wooden little box with a stopper down there to stop the mast from going all the way down to the bottom. So right now I need to modify the mast to fit into that slot. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. This may bother a lot of people, but I'm gonna be tearing up everything below the main halyard line. So all this will be removed from the mast. The help of that lovely Dremel, I was able to saw off the rivets, and now this should just slide straight out. There we go. So now all I have to do is get rid of this cleat and one more cleat on that side, and then we're good. Honestly, it was a little challenging removing these cleats. I really didn't want to damage the mast, so I took my time and tried my best to get a nice clean cut. Alright guys, so sorry I didn't film this part, but I just put the mast support in, and right now it's being held on together with this clamp. And let me back up for you guys. I put the mast in its slot and it's looking pretty good. So now I'm gonna work on cutting the top of the mast, but before I do so, I'm gonna raise the mainsail just to see what it looks like and where it's gonna end up on the mast. And then I'll take it down, cut it, and then for those who want to see, I will put the mast into its slot all by myself. You can see how that goes.
Raising the mainsail was pretty self-explanatory. It took me a while because there's a small rip in the stitching, but that should be an easy fix.
So this is a prime example of what not to do if you haven't fully secured or fastened anything yet.
I thought it'd be a good idea to pull on the mainsail, which caused it to completely fall over. I love my dad's reaction, but all in all, it would have been a really easy mistake to avoid.
So what you just saw was a prime example of what not to do when raising a mainsail. I stupidly did not fully attach this inside, and the clamp I had inside holding everything together broke away because I stupidly pulled the sail, which made it catch wind. Well, now we know that the sail works, and thankfully there was no major damage. There's a little bit of cracking, but that I don't really care about that. But now we're gonna fully attach this into place with this big 2x4 and a bunch of 3-inch screws. And then when that's fully attached, we can do this again, but with the mast trimmed, so everything will look proper and how it should be. Okay, so it is the next day, and I did install the mast support, and sorry I didn't film it, but it was very cramped in here and I couldn't get a good recording angle for you guys, so I just installed it. If you want to know what I did, I just took some 2x4 and I drilled them into these two bulkheads. I added another 2x4 there to prevent the mast support from slipping forward when there's tension on the mast or forces being applied to the mast. So that's how I secured it, and then I just screwed it into this bulkhead or rib. So now that's secure. What I got to do is I have these large bolts which will fixate the mast to the mast support, so there will be 3 here and then 1 below the deck. That'll just help secure the mast to the boat and prevent it from going anywhere. So I'll drill these guys in, we'll cut the mast, and we can raise the mainsail again and try not to have another accident. I've just made markings on the mast support of where to drill. Now I'm gonna take a drill bit the same diameter as the bolt and drill a nice clean hole straight through this piece of wood. Then we're gonna put the mast back in, and we're gonna use a Sharpie to mark out the areas where I need to cut out on the mast. We'll take it out, and then we'll use a metal drill bit the same diameter as these bolts and drill those holes, and then we can fit her back into place. Now that these holes are drilled, we're gonna pick up the mast, place it into its slot, take a Sharpie, and mark out where we have to drill the holes on the mast to fit these bolts.
You guys are gonna notice that I'm moving the mast around a lot. It got a little annoying, but it was worth it.
So now with the marks all marked out, I don't know if you can see the Sharpie dot in there. Well, now all we gotta do is just take the mast back out, cut the holes again, put it back in, make sure it fits, and then we can raise the mainsail, see how high it goes up on the mast, and then we'll cut off the excess.
If anyone is wondering, the mast weighs about 30 pounds. I'm honestly just guessing, so I'm not quite sure. Once I got it off the boat though, my dad and I drilled the holes to help support it.
So I got the mast back into its place and I inserted the bolts and tightened them down as hard as I could, and it's feeling pretty rigid. When I shake the mast, it shakes the whole boat, and that's without the shrouds and the front forestay. So now we're gonna attempt to raise the mainsail again and see how that goes. And then I'll determine where I should cut the top once the mainsail is up. Once that's up, we'll just see how it looks, and then we'll bring her back down and cut the top off, and then we should be good. Alright, so I hoisted up the mainsail and it's looking pretty good, although it doesn't quite reach the top of the mast, and it's a little bit shorter than I would want it to be. But I got the sail for a really good deal, so I just bought it. My plan is we're gonna take the mainsail down, we're gonna cut it. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a black piece of tape. We're gonna cut it right there. So that'll be the top of the mast. So then I have a little bit of wiggle room if I wanna get a new sail down in the future, which I probably will. I marked out where I'm gonna cut the mast. From the bottom of the mast all the way up here, it is 18 feet and 6 inches. When the sail's up, I have about like a 1.5 foot or like foot-ish of space of like wiggle room. So in the future, if I get a bigger sail, it should fit. But what I've done is I added this piece of duct tape that goes around the whole mast, and it's like a guide kinda, so I can get a nice clean and straight cut. I'm gonna start and use this Sawzall to make this cut. Alright, so we just made the cut, and thankfully we didn't cut through the rope, and it is looking pretty ugly right here. So what I'm gonna do is take an angle grinder and clean this up.
After using the angle grinder, I used a few different files to thoroughly clean up the edge of the mast. Moving on, my friend Christian and I started working on the hatch cover.
Okay, so here's our hatch, which will be going right here. So we have to add some strips of wood that go right here, so this raises it up and so water doesn't come in. And then we also have another piece of wood right here. It's kind of hard to explain, but you guys will see what I mean in a little bit. So this is how the top hatch is going to work. I have these scrap pieces of wood. These will be tracks, so the top hatch can slide across these. So essentially, this is how it's gonna work. The top hatch will sit on top of these slides, and to get inside and out of the cabin, you just slide it back and forth, which is pretty easy, and I'm pretty sure that's how most boat hatches work. So what I have to do is I have to fill this gap with some scrap wood, and then I have to fill this gap right here so no water can get into the boat, and I have to build more slides. It's kind of complicated and hard to describe, but it basically ensures that this top hatch won't fall off when I'm sailing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some cardboard and make a stencil. I'll add a piece of wood right here, and then we can work on the part that will secure this hatch to the rest of the boat.
Essentially, I cut up some small pieces of cardboard, then taped them back together following the curve of the boat. This way, I was able to make a nice template that overall got the job done.
So it's not the best line, but it should work. Let's see if this fits for the most part. It fits the curve of the top of the cabin, but right here it's not perfect. I don't really care about that. I can always just fill that with some Bondo later on, which is probably what I'm gonna do. So now all I gotta do is cut a line so it can fit underneath this support. Alright, so now that I've marked out that line, I'm gonna make the cut and let's see if it fits. Alright, so our piece is in and it fits alright. There are multiple gaps, but that's nothing some Bondo can't fix. What I'm thinking of doing is taking 1/4 of an inch off right here, so we have room to slip in another piece of plywood that can sit underneath this tracks to give it more support. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna recreate this process, but for the other track. Okay, so I made the starboard piece and it fits okay. It'll do the job though, and I also made this front piece right here. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lightly secure this all together so it keeps its shape, and then I'm gonna go around and add some fairing compound to fill up all these gaps. And then I'm gonna take a scrap piece of wood and put it right here just to fill this gap. And then we start working on the sliding mechanism, which I will need the top of the hatch for that.
To secure everything together, I simply use 2-inch wood screws. Don't worry, all this will get covered with epoxy later.
So now that I've added a screw into every single corner, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add the side panels in on both sides. I'm gonna add the small strip of wood just to fill this gap. And then I'm gonna go everywhere on the interior and add some Bondo just to secure it to the deck even more. And then I'll add a little bit to the exterior, but I have to keep it as flush as possible to keep this corner nice and tidy for the sliding mechanism. And then we'll go from there.
Some might say that I should have used thickened epoxy instead of Bondo, but I went with this because it won't be under any stress in the future. It was also the cheapest option for me.
So I got the compound all placed on the interior of the hatch, and I know you're thinking this looks like a horrible job, but I am going to be adding a piece of wood right here to prevent the hatch from sliding too far this way. So this will literally just be empty space and no one will see this, so I don't really care how this looks. But right now I got some more Gorilla Glue or Gorilla Construction Adhesive. So what I'm going to do is take this and put this on all the cracks on the exterior and the interior, sealing everything up completely. If you don't know what this construction adhesive is, it's basically this like silicone stuff. So here's an example of what it is. It's really good for holding stuff together, and I highly recommend it because it works with fiberglass and wood and it is waterproof. But yep, so I'm just gonna add a thin bead of this to seal up all the other gaps.
This part was actually pretty easy and satisfying. After laying the waterproof silicone, I used a paper towel to smooth it out.
Okay, so to attach the hatch to these sliding tracks and to allow it to slide, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make something similar to these panel brackets. I'm gonna make like an L, and then they're gonna be attached like so. Of course it's gonna be longer, so this piece will attach to here, but this will allow the cabin to slide forward and backwards while preventing water from entering the cabin. So to make this L, what I'm gonna do is I have this 1x3, so I'm just gonna cut it down to make my L shape. Alright, so now that I made that cut, I made some markings of how I'm gonna make the L shape. And now all I have to do is remove this section of wood right here, and I'll do the same to the other piece. Here's the second piece. Alright, so I got one side in and it went fairly well, so now I'll show you guys how I did it before the starboard side.
To install this, I placed the hatch into its spot, made sure that I had room to slide, then I screwed my piece of wood in.
Okay, so to finish off the top hatch area, what I have to do is I need to clean up all this compound in here. I gotta get it nice and sanded because when the hatch is closed, this will be exposed and I don't want it looking like this. And then to prevent any water from coming in, I need to add a piece of wood right here.
To sand and smooth out the interior Bondo, I just wrapped a PVC pipe with 80 grit sandpaper and just hand sanded it. I then added some more silicone.
Alright, so sorry for that bad lighting. I think it was this panel that was reflecting the light onto the camera. But if you didn't catch what I did, I just took some more of that caulk or the silicone and I just made it look a little bit better. Now, I know it still doesn't look that good, but this is all going to be painted white, so this won't really stand out that much. And now I'm just going to let this dry. And then since this is a slanted piece of wood, I'm just going to drill some drainage holes just in case if any water gets up in here. So now the next step is to add a piece of wood right here, which goes to the top of these tracks. And then I gotta add a piece of wood to the hatch.
This was pretty simple. I just found a scrap piece of 1x4, cut it down to fit, and then installed it.
Alright, so now that this piece is installed, I'm going to take some more of this silicone and fill up these gaps just to make it extra waterproof. And I'll put a nice clean bead right here to fill this crack. And then we can add the last piece, which is to fill this gap right here. So I don't really care how this edge looks. I won't be able to see this, and it looks pretty waterproof, so I think it's pretty good. Now I'm just gonna let this dry, and then we can move on to this piece.
I never actually made this piece. Instead, I covered the rails with some epoxy.
So I'm not gonna lie, since I finished these sections on the boat, she has sat outside for a little bit and has collected a fair amount of dust and dirt and sawdust. But she's still sturdy and holding up, so here are the results. So here is the mast support. I've got the bolts in and I got them tied down, and it's holding up pretty well. I also added a layer of epoxy to it because I'd like to keep this a nice wood color. Not a wood color, but like I want to keep it wood and then have everything else painted. I think that'll be a pretty cool accent. I am gonna add more epoxy to it. I just added the last bit of epoxy that I could just to waterproof her. And if you turn around or go to this side, there's usually a piece of wood right here, but this got pretty weathered and there's some mold growing on it, and I don't like how this hole is drilled, so I'm gonna replace that. So that's the mast support, and then on the interior, I got a bunch of stuff in here, but you can see the post right here. I also started painting, that's for another video. I got the post right here, and she's still holding up and doing pretty good. So the mast support is doing great, and I liked how it turned out. Now, moving on to the hatch, I kind of changed up some stuff. I added some drainage holes, so if any water gets into here, it'll drain out through these holes on those two sides. I did not like how the sliding rail worked, so I just completely removed these. I just have them on here just so you guys can get a sense of how they fit or what they look like with the boat. But essentially I have a giant wood piece that would slide right here that's also been covered in epoxy. But I'm gonna completely redo these in the next episode and get this all figured out, and I'll probably sand her and add a little bit more epoxy, but that's how she turned out. So yeah. So if you guys made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next boat video is coming in a week, and I promise, because this weekend my friend and I, we're gonna finish up the mast and get that all figured out. So you guys get that video in a week. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this right now, post a comment down below, and if I find it, I'll add your name in the boat. Yeah. All right, thanks for watching.